Hello, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to talk about the main causes of World War I and the U.S. during World War I. So when we talk about World War I, historians like to use this acronym, right, referring to the main causes of World War I. So let's break down what this acronym is, MAIN. So M stands for militarism. So European nations, they compete to have the biggest and best military, especially an arms race. This arms race happened between Britain, France, and Germany. England was known for having like the strongest navy in the world. Whenever Germany unifies into a country in 1871, they start building their own navy too in order to rival Great Britain. Well, that prompts Great Britain to build more ships. So this militarism, this arms race, everyone's stockpiling weapons. We start seeing like parades all the time, these military parades. Like it's the 4th of July all the time across Europe. People are glorifying the military and building up their weapons. So militarism is one of the main causes of World War I. The next one is the alliance system. Okay, so the alliance system is Europeans, they're going to create alliances with each other in order to, have backup in case a fight happens, right? Because if a war breaks out, you don't want to be fighting like all these different countries on your own. You want backup, you want help. So the alliance system is going to be another big cause to what's going to start World War I. Also, imperialism. So in our last video, we talked about America during the late 1800s, early 1900s, is expanding into a full-fledged empire. Well, as well as Europe, they are also expanding too. So Europe is taking over places like Asia and Africa. They're taking more and more land for themselves, and eventually they're going to run out of land to take, right, from other people, so they're going to end up taking land from each other. The N in Maine stands for nationalism. Each nation wants to prove that they are the best country in the world. And in order to prove that your country is the best country in the world, you are willing to go fight in a war, right? This is where we get that term jingoism from, this aggressive nationalism. Militarism and nationalism are going to go really, hand in hand during this time. So when we talked about the alliance systems, there are two alliance blocks during World War I that you should know about. The first one is the Triple Entente. Sometimes they're referred to as the Allied powers. That is Great Britain, also Russia under Tsar Nicholas II, and France, Clemenceau. He is going to be the French leader, part of this French alliance. So the Triple Entente, a good way to remember it is Entente is a French word, so that's the alliance with France in it. The other alliance block is the Triple Alliance, or known as the Central Powers. So the Triple Alliance consists of Germany with Kaiser Wilhelm, Austria-Hungary with Emperor Franz Joseph, Italy, and the Ottoman Empire. Now, the thing about Italy is that as soon as World War I breaks out, even though before World War I they're part of the Triple Alliance, as soon as the war breaks out, they're going to actually switch sides and join the Triple Entente. So Italy is included in the Triple Alliance, but they're going to switch sides at the beginning. So you just need to know that. And at the outbreak of World War I, America is neutral. Okay, they're going to take a neutral stance. They're not going to choose either side, right? It's just as likely that America would have joined the Triple Alliance as the Triple Entente. But we'll get to that in a second. All right, so for our purposes, you just need to know the basics about how does World War I begin and that America is neutral at the beginning of it. So we might go into a little bit more detail about causes of World War I and stuff, but it's important. So when we talk about Austria-Hungary, right, they're not the only ethnic groups in this empire. It's a very ethnically homogenous empire or dehomogeneous empire where there's many of different nationalities. There's different people that believe that they should be part of their own country sandwiched together in Austria-Hungary. So we do have the Austrians and the Hungarians, but also we have Transylvanians and Bosnians and Serbians and some other Slovenians and stuff. We have all these different ethnic groups smushed together in Austria-Hungary. Each one of them want independence for themselves. They want to break away from Austria-Hungary. So by the 1900s, Austria-Hungary is going to be a very tense place, right? Where it looks like it's going to erupt into war, a civil war any day now. So in July of 1914, there's going to be this guy, Gavril Princip. He is a member of the Serbian nationalist movement. So he is technically a citizen of Austria-Hungary. However, ethnically, he is Serbian, but he's not part of Serbia. So he and his this group that he's attached to, the Black Hand, wants independence of Serbians, ethnic Serbians. They want to join the country of Serbia and break away from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So in order to do that, Gavril Princip and the other members of the Black Hand are going to assassinate the Archduke of Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. So Franz Ferdinand, he was next in line to the Austro-Hungarian throne. He was on parade in southern Austria-Hungary. He was trying to spark some peace and stuff and try to show the other pieces of the empire hey, we should still remain one big kingdom and everything. Gavril Princip is going to end up killing Franz Ferdinand, and this is going to trigger the alliance system starting World War I. So this is a picture of Franz Joseph and his wife. They're going into this car and stuff, going on a parade. And then this is, in the bottom right-hand corner, is a picture of, Gavril Princip getting arrested right after Franz Ferdinand is assassinated. So whenever World War I breaks out, all these alliances that we talked about, the Triple Entente, the Triple Alliance, they're called into effect. Austria declares war on Serbia, which causes Germany to back up Austria-Hungary. Russia declares war on Austria-Hungary and Germany for invading Serbia, and it makes this huge domino effect. So where's America in this? So America, they wanted to isolate themselves. They said that this was a European problem, that, it's better for us if we just mind our own business. So this goes all the way back to George Washington, our very first president. In George Washington's farewell address, he made a speech addressing America entangling itself in European affairs. He says that Europe is always fighting each other. Europe is at a point where they're constantly fighting each other every single year. And it would just be in America's best interest if we mind our own business. So that's one argument, right? That the U.S. should stay isolationist because George Washington said so in his farewell address, at this point, 150 years before this. Also, remember when we talked about the Industrial Revolution, right? All these people, these immigrants are moving into American cities like New York and Chicago. And a large portion of those immigrants were German. So on one hand, America was the 13 colonies was an English colony, right? They were part of England, so we have a very strong English ties and English background. But also America is at this point where there's a lot of ethnic Germans living in the United States as well. These are very strong German communities. Even during the American Civil War, there are going to be entirely German-speaking units fighting for the Union. We were just as likely to join Germany in World War I against England than we would join England against Germany, right? So we're sort of caught in the middle between this. And also, a lot of people believe that American first, right? Let's focus on Americans' problems first before we start entangling ourselves in European affairs. Now, even though America didn't join the war effort immediately, we took a neutral stance. America really we decided to help out both sides actually economically. So we ended up sending goods and foods and weapons to both sides, the Central Alliance and the Triple Entente together. But President Wilson, remember we talked about the progressive president Woodrow Wilson, he is going to have a slogan when he runs for re-election saying he kept us out of war. Right? He's not going to keep America out of war during all of World War I, but at the beginning of his term, that's what he was really focused on. Keep America out of war, but play both sides, sending troops and not troops, but money and supplies to both sides. So this is a picture of a Democratic National Convention wagon and stuff driving through the streets with all these things saying like, hey, Wilson kept us out of war. So a lot of people really bought into this because a lot of Americans didn't want to involve themselves in World War One. So what eventually does pull America into World War One, which you do need to know, might come up on a future assessment, is submarine warfare. Okay, so submarines weren't by any means a new technology. Right? Even during the American Civil War, America technically developed the first submarines. However, by World War I, Germany perfected submarine warfare. Their submarines, they called them U-boats, which in German is Unterwasserboot, underwater boat. German's a very literal language. So Germany's main strategy in the Atlantic Ocean was unrestricted submarine warfare. England is an island. England has what I mentioned before, the strongest navy in the world. So in order to combat that navy, and in order to keep England from supplying troops on mainland Europe, Germans are going to use submarine warfare. They're going to shoot down any naval vessel in the Atlantic Ocean. So the U-boats, they would sink. They would use torpedoes to sink any vessel, right? It didn't matter if it was civilian, military, anything was fair game. That's what makes this unrestricted submarine warfare. And Germany even took out ads in American ports, these posters everywhere saying, hey, Americans, sail at your own risk. We are out there. There were accounts of U-boats in New York City's harbor and stuff. So Americans, they were wary, but they continued to stay neutral. All right. So a turning point happened whenever we get to 1915. So World War I has gone on for like a year at this point. There's going to be this ship, this British liner called the Lusitania. The Lusitania was stationed in America, and they were headed towards England. And the Germans, to give the Germans credit, they sent out warnings right before the Lusitania set sail. They said, hey, Americans, do not sail on this ship. This is a target. We are going to sink it. Still, 118 Americans didn't listen. They went on the Lusitania anyway, and then surprise, surprise, the U-boat sunk the Lusitania. This is going to kill about 1,198 passengers. 118 of them are going to be Americans. And America is going to be in an uproar about this. So remember I mentioned that America is really on the fence if we're going to join Germany's side or England's side in this conflict. Well, once the Lusitania got sunk, once Germans actually ended up killing Americans during this unrestricted submarine warfare, this turns their public opinion against Germany. So many people are calling for America to declare war on Germany at this moment. However, they decide to back down. The agreement is that America told Germany, okay, Germany, we will not declare war on you as long as you stop doing unrestricted submarine warfare. And Germany does. So from 1915 on, Germany stops doing unrestricted submarine warfare, and they only attack naval vessels that they know belong to England. Now, by 1917, World War I is going on, right? It's dragging on. We're in the middle of trench warfare. No side is gaining any ground. So Germany, they're sitting there saying like, hey, we need to start turning the tide of this war. So in 1917, Germany is going to restart unrestricted submarine warfare, even though they promised America that they won it. So once this happened, tensions rose between the U.S. and Germany. It looks like the U.S. is going to declare war on Germany at any moment now. So also at the same time, America is having problems with Mexico. So in Mexico, there's this guy Pancho Villa, and he is going to lead, these war parties and stuff. These bandit. He's like a bandit leader and stuff. He's going to start burning down like some American towns and stuff along the coast in the southeast. So America is on this hunt for Pancho Villa. They're going to march the U.S. military into Mexico. So Mexico is already not very happy with the United States over how they're handling this Pancho Villa thing, occupying Mexican soil with American troops. So Germany wants to cash in on this tense relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. So Germany is going to send a telegraph message over to Mexico. We call this the Zimmermann telegram. Zimmermann was a German diplomat. So in the Zimmermann telegram, right, Germany is going to ask Mexico to join in a war against America. And if Mexico agrees to fight against America on behalf of Germany, Germany will back them up, and they promise that Mexico could retake part of the southeast that America stole from them. So when Germany sent this message, it actually got intercepted by London, by England. So in England, they got this message from Germany that they were sending to Mexico for Mexico to declare war on the United States. But England is going to intercept this message and send it to the United States and say, hey, U.S., look at this message that I just got from Germany. And this is going to be the final straw. America is going to be in an uproar. They're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe they're trying to get Mexico to attack us. And this is going to finally throw America into World War I. So on a future assessment, I might ask you, what causes America to join World War I? Well, one of them would be the resumption of submarine warfare after the sinking of the Lusitania. And then two would be the final straw that broke the camel's back, which was the Zimmermann telegram that was intercepted by England, sent back to America. All right, so right after this interception of the Zimmermann telegram, America is ticked off. They are like, we've had enough with Germany. We need to declare war. So Wilson, in April 1917, is going to address Congress and say that the world must be made safe for democracy. And then the U.S. enters this war against Germany. Actually, I believe all the U.S. senators voted in on voting for America to join World War I, besides like one from like Wisconsin, because Wisconsin had a very strong German population. So America enters World War I, but by no means is America able to fight in a war at this moment. They're ill-prepared and ill-equipped. So within weeks of the war, the U.S. starts to alter the balance of the conflict, right? So the war has gone on for about 3 years at this point, and it had been a stalemate. No side is gaining either ground, and millions of people are dying on both sides. So America is going to start sending its destroyers over to the northern Atlantic Ocean in order to combat this submarine warfare. They start planting anti-submarine mines in the Atlantic Ocean too. So America is going to send its Navy in there, back up the British Navy, and start to retake the Atlantic Ocean. So you could see in this is a chart of the sinking in tons of Allied ships. So in April of 1917, this is just 1 month, right? 900,000 tons of ships got sunk due to submarines. And then America joins the war. right? So April 1917, they joined the war, so there's no like immediate difference. But by December of that year, it's already cut in half to 350 tons. And then by October of 1918, that's only 1,120 1,000 tons of goods being destroyed. So America entering in this war does make a difference in at least the Atlantic Ocean. So what about all the German-speaking people in the United States? Because there are millions of German-speaking immigrants. That there's a very strong, thriving German community in the United States. Places like Chicago and Milwaukee, they had German-speaking newspapers. They had German public schools, and very strong German communities where generations, actually learn German and stuff from their parents. Where a couple generations go by and still German is their first language. So once World War I breaks out, things start to change. Right? It's no longer cool to be ethnically German, right? So this is, in the bottom right-hand corner, is a newspaper clipping about German and Austro-Americans. So you could see that Germany and Austria is like crossed out. So I'm going to read you this thing. It says, "Men and women of German and Austrian blood, we ask you to remember that this is your country now. You owe no allegiance to any king or Kaiser, but you do owe everything to this great America that has given you your jobs, your homes, your businesses. This country has given you a greater chance for happiness and success than any other country on the globe could give you." So this newspaper article is saying you are no longer German American. You are no longer Austro American. You are just American now. So you need to forget your language, forget your culture. Germans were getting thrown in jail for speaking in their native tongue, right? So if you got caught speaking German in public and stuff, they thought you were a spy, they'd throw you in jail. So this is blatantly going against freedom of speech. And this is going to be a common trend that we start seeing during wartime, U.S. during wartime, where, our constitutional rights get a little fudged, right? In the upper left-hand corner is another propaganda poster. So what makes World War I a sort of different kind of war is the use of propaganda posters to really try to rally the U.S. population. So this says, "Destroy this mad brute, enlist." So the goal of this poster was to get people to enlist in fighting Germany. And you could see that Germany is depicted as a gorilla, a monkey, right? This is part of that simianization back when we talked about the white man's burden and imperialism in the last video. So Germany now is seen as a monkey, not civilized, right? But his stick that's covered in blood says culture. So this is what's going to happen, right? Germany is going to come over to America. They're going to destroy Europe. They're going to bring German culture and destroy our American values. And then you could see American woman like Lady Liberty is getting kidnapped. So it's sort of like a King Kong situation. In the next poster, right next to it, says, "Keep the Hun out. Buy some protection with some war-saving stance." So you could see that they're drawing this analogy, this connection to Germany being like the Hun, which are like the barbarians who sacked Rome and stuff. So they're saying you need to keep the Hun out. You need to keep the Germans out. And your way of doing that is by buying war bonds and stamps and stuff. So support the U.S. military by donating your money to help the war cause. Another weird thing that happened during World War I is anything with German-sounding names actually got changed. So the Germans, they brought over sauerkraut, and sauerkraut is going to become very popular during this time. It's a good way to preserve cabbage. This is before a lot of people have refrigeration and stuff. So instead of being called sauerkraut, the U.S. government's going to rename sauerkraut into Liberty cabbage. So, you could get a big jar of Liberty cabbage, right, instead of sauerkraut. After World War I and II, it's going to go back to being called sauerkraut. Same sort of thing as with hot dogs, right? So a lot of people call hot dogs Franks. That comes back to Frankfurters, right? Frankfurt is a city in Germany, introduced hot dogs as a sausage but Frankfurters sounds too German, so there we go, hot dogs. All right, so America is now thrown into World War One, but they're not ready for World War One. So remember when we talked about the Buffalo Soldiers during the Spanish-American War, that all-black infantry unit and stuff? So the leader of that unit was this guy, John Jack Black Pershing, right? Well, by World War One, Pershing is still in the U.S. military and stuff, and he's going to be promoted by this point. He's going to become the supreme commander of the U.S. Armed Forces. So Pershing says that by 1918, the U.S. military should have about 1 million fighting men. And by 1919, we should have about 3 million fighting men. So Congress is like, okay, how are we going to get so many people to join our military? Well, in 1917, the Congress passes the Selective Service Act, which authorizes a draft for young men into military service. So today, we still have the Selective Service Act, right? Where once you turn 18 and you're a man, you could be drafted into the military if need be, right? If a war breaks out and this gets called in, there you go. So remember that by 1918, the goal was 1 million fighting men. So to everyone's surprise, by 1918, the U.S. military actually had 24 million men volunteer for the military, and only 3 million of them were actually picked by the lottery, by this Selective Service Act. So 24 million men volunteered out of their own volition. So this shows the massive support that the people had in order to join World War I at this point. So whenever the soldiers finally do end up in overseas on the Western Front, they're going to get a nickname. Right, the French troops, they saw these American soldiers in their brown uniforms, and they called them doughboys, right, because they look like a big ball of dough, right? So if you've ever seen doughboys, like the Pillsbury Doughboy, that's like the American soldiers during World War I. So remember we talked about the Buffalo Soldiers, the all-black infantry unit that was led by Pershing during the Spanish-American War. So by World War I, America still has a segregated military. So our military unit is going to be called the Harlem Hellfighters. So there's going to be an all-black infantry unit called the Harlem Hellfighters, and they're going to fight in the front lines during World War I. So this was actually attached to the French army, right? So America, we really didn't want an all-black infantry unit like representing us during World War I. So instead, the U.S. Army is going to give this unit, the Harlem Hellfighters, over to France. And France is they need all the help that they could get. So these Harlem Hellfighters are fighting on the front lines. They're making a name for themselves, and they're going to be some of the most highly decorated soldiers during World War I. For example, this guy Henry Lincoln Johnson is going to end up saving his whole unit from a German counteroffensive. He's going to get shot multiple times, get injured, and he's going to fight the Germans with his bare hands, which earns him the Legion of Honor, which is like the highest badge medal that the French military service could give. However, Johnson, even though he made this great sacrifice, he saved his men, this would have got him the Medal of Honor if he was a white soldier, but because he wasn't, the U.S. military didn't want to recognize Johnson's deeds, and he's going to go largely unnoticed until actually Barack Obama, in his presidency, he's going to honorarily give Johnson the Medal of Honor. So nice little, story about how this segregated unit really did fight for what they believed in, their values, and then they wanted to show whenever they returned from the war that, hey, black people could fight as well as the white people. Maybe we should end segregation, right? So we start seeing the very beginning stirrings of the civil rights movement out of this. All right, so we need to talk about how was World War I conducted. Okay, so World War I was fought using trench warfare. So we're sort of rewinding the clock a little bit, right? So whenever France and England went to war against Germany and Austria-Hungary and stuff, they start fighting this war. But what makes World War One a different kind of war is that they're using these old tactics from the 1800s of like cavalry charges, guys with swords on horses riding into battle, or people taking turns like charging at each other, shooting, just like this line warfare and stuff. So we have this older style of warfare, but also we have this new military technology like machine guns. So we have this massive wave of people running, charging at the enemy, and they're just going to get mowed down by machine gun fire. So people are going to learn early on that this is going to be a defensive war. So instead of just flat out charging at each other the whole time, Germany and France and England, they're going to really dig in, right? They're going to start digging up these trenches and stuff. And this is what World War I is going to really be characterized in the Western Front, at least, with trench warfare. So you would have these lines and lines of trenches, these barricades and stuff, where soldiers would just sit and wait for the enemy to try to charge and take their trench out, and then you would open fire at them. So people are just taking turns trying to take these trenches and everything. So where most wars are fought in miles, World War I is going to be fought in inches. People are going to lose thousands of people on every attack, right, in an instant, just trying to take one line of trenches. And as soon as you take that line of trenches, it turns out there's 5 more right behind there. Also, we get this term called no man's land. This is the area between the trenches. It's called no man's land because if you step foot in it, you're not going to survive. So in World War I, we get a lot of new weapons. Remember, we talked about the Industrial Revolution, all these new technologies that are coming out around 1900. Well, we get the Industrial Revolution, and it's going to make it very easy to make mass killings, right? So we get new weapons like the machine gun. So instead of a bunch of people just taking turns shooting muskets like 100 years before, now we have one person who could shoot thousands of bullets in a minute and stuff. So we have the machine gun. We also have the first tanks. We have heavy artillery that could lob shells miles away. We have the first airplanes in combat. And also we have poison gas like mustard gas. So these technological advances are going to cause a lot of mass killings during World War I. And because of all this carnage and stuff, people are going to nickname World War I the war to end all wars. They said that we can't fight another devastating war like this. So many people are dying. Entire generations of people are getting wiped out. We need to stop war. Unfortunately, that's not going to be true, and World War II is going to turn out to be even more devastating than World War I. So while I was in graduate school, I actually got to go see a World War I battlefield. So this is the trenches at Orbe, which is on the Western Front. It is the area of land near the Rhine River between France and Germany. But during World War I, this is going to be a very heavy battleground where thousands of people are going to die, right? So some of these trenches were nice and paved and made with stone and everything. So this is a picture of some trenches that some pictures of trenches that I took. And then also beyond the trenches, we have a no man's land. We have this forest covered by barbed wire and stuff. And still today, there's hundreds of people buried out into this forest. They can't dig them up because there's still active minefield there. So every year, the French government has to send in people like bomb squads to dig up dead bodies. So they're still unearthing tons of dead bodies in this forest today. Right, so this is a reminder that we are not that removed from World War I. This is something that happened 100 years ago, but we still, experience it. Even today, there's still a lot of like unexploded artillery shells from World War I that some French farmer is like plowing his field and stuff and accidentally runs over a landmine. Right, it still happens, but a little crazy. So this is a picture of a German trench during World War One. You can see that these people are just like, packed up together. They're just waiting for the next attack. A surprising part about World War One is that the boredom, right? You're just sort of waiting for something to happen, right? You're waiting for the next attack to happen. But once that attack does happen, you might die, right? So a lot of soldiers, they got killed going over the top into no man's land, right? You're just waiting, right? So what you would do is your side would start shooting artillery at the enemy's trench day and night for several days, right? Trying to soften up the target. And then all of a sudden, right, this artillery stops. And then your commander will blow his whistle and says, hey, go over the top, boys. Let's try to take the other trench. And you would have to go into no man's land. You don't have any other choice. If you refuse, you could get court-martialed, you could get thrown in jail, or sometimes you get shot on the spot. So you have to go into no man's land, and you have to try to take out the other trench. But once that artillery stops, they're waiting for you, right? So odds are you're going to get mowed down. And a lot of soldiers did, right? This is a pictures of a French attack on a German trench. They didn't even make it to the trench. They got mowed down. So in no man's land, there's going to be bodies everywhere, right? So there's tons of bodies, but people can't pick them up, right? They can't bury these bodies because if they try going into no man's land, they will also get shot. So in World War I, we'd start seeing large rats appear in these trenches. These rats, they're getting so large because they're eating the dead bodies off of people. So in the trenches, we would actually have rat catchers, rat hunters, trying to catch all these rats and stuff that are feasting off the dead bodies. They're everywhere, and these rats were super aggressive too. There's all sorts of accounts of like World War I soldiers waking up in the middle of the night because like their toes were getting nibbled by a rat. Also, a lot of these trenches weren't nice and paved, right? A lot of them were just trenches dug holes in the ground and stuff, right? So whenever it rained, and in Western Europe, it rains a lot. So whenever it rained, the trenches would just fill up with water. So imagine you're in a pool for a long time, right? Your hands and your feet start shriveling up and everything. Can you imagine what it would be like to sit in ankle deep of water, sometimes knee deep of water for several days? So a condition appears called trench foot, where a lot of these soldiers, their feet literally start like blistering and peeling off of themselves. So I'm sorry, it's a very gross picture, but trench foot is definitely a condition that impacted thousands of soldiers during World War I. So this is a picture of a German grenadier, right? You could see the guy shooting a machine gun over the trench and stuff, but also this guy with a gas mask is going to throw his grenade. And gas attacks, right? This gas, it's chlorine gas, they called it mustard gas back then. Once it touches your skin, it will burn you, right? If you inhale it, it feels like your lungs are burning from the inside out. So this is a picture of some American gas attack victims. You could see the bandages over their face because if that gas touches your eyes, you're done for, right? You're going to be blinded. So in college, I had to read a diary of a French soldier on the front lines during World War I, and he went through World War I, and he, back then they had like signing bonuses, right? Where you and a buddy could sign up and it'll guarantee that you'll be in the same military unit together. So him and his buddy, they grew up together. They're on the front lines. And then one day a German gas attack happens and he goes on to put on his gas mask. Everything is fine. His friend had a hole in his gas mask and his eyes literally like melted and stuff right in front of him. So it feels like you're drowning and stuff. They're just it's a very bad way to go. So this is another picture of American gas attack victim. You could see all the like sores and stuff over his face and arms. It's a really hard way to go, right? And this is a picture. I like this because it shows horses and mules. They're also wearing gas masks. So we have all this new technology like machine guns and artillery and gas and stuff. But also we have horses in the battle too. Lots of horses at this time. And the horses also need gas masks because if they breathe in this gas, they're going to be in trouble too. So these are some American troops going over the barbed wire. There's a song called Hanging on the Barbed Wire, referring to these soldiers going across no man's land. They get mowed down and they are hanging on the barbed wire. If we were in person, I would show you this video. I'd play the song and stuff, but go look on it. It's on YouTube and stuff. It's a pretty catchy song, but it sort of highlights how soldiers experience World War I. All right. Also, we have in the trench warfare and stuff, new weapon, the flamethrower. So the flamethrower also, was used for trench warfare. You could shoot literally a line of fire across the trench and burn everyone in your way. America also had a weapon called the trench gun, which is just like a buckshot shotgun, right? Which is very effective in clearing out trenches. But the thing is, these aren't like, I don't even know if you could call it a humane way of killing someone, but also these weapons were meant to do a job which was incapacitate your victim, right? Your enemy. They didn't care about a quick, clean kill and stuff. So both sides used these horrendous weapons, and the goal of World War I isn't to take land, right? The goal of it is to inflict as much damage on your enemy as you can and wear them down and cause them to surrender. So this is why they call World War I a war of attrition. You are trying to wear down your enemy until they give up. So this is a picture of some more soldiers, right? And they are like sewing their clothes and stuff, waiting for the next attack to happen. This is a very famous picture called the Smiling Dead Man. So you can see the guy in the bottom right-hand corner. Looks like he's like taking a nap and stuff, but half of him's like blown up. So very horrific war. Also during World War I, we have a lot of like notable historical figures. So for example, the American writer Ernest Hemingway was part of World War I, and a lot of his writings afterwards are very anti-war, talking about the horrors of warfare and stuff. But also Adolf Hitler, right? Adolf Hitler is going to be a Austrian soldier during World War I, and there's going to be he actually had a dog in World War I too. His dog was named Fuchel, and someone actually stole Fuchel from him. So sort of crazy and stuff that Hitler was involved in World War I. But when we talk about the rise of Hitler and stuff, it will become very important. All right, so America joins the war in 1917, right? And at this point, Germany and England and France, they're exhausted. They are just worn down. No one's making any ground. Both sides have lost millions of people at this point. So America joining World War I is going to turn the tide of the war. We aren't doing anything different, right? We are going to continue this trench warfare and stuff. We're going to have the same weapons as Germany did. But the difference is we are going to provide thousands and thousands of fresh troops to the front lines, and that's something that Germany doesn't have. So America is going to join the war, and then all of Germany's allies were defeated. Germany is pretty much the last one of their allies standing. They're going to try, Germany is going to try doing like one last big push before America gets there, called the Kaiserschlacht, but it's not going to work. So these new American troops make it impossible for Germany to gain any ground, and Germany is going to request an armistice, which is a ceasefire, on November 11th at 11. So they call this 11-11-11, right? The 11th day of the 11th hour of the 11th month. So this is when World War I ends. And today we celebrate that as Veterans Day, right? The first Veterans Day gets created in 1954. So this will become important when we talk about World War II. Germany, they technically don't surrender. They say an armistice, a ceasefire. So technically, none of Germany's actual territory got invaded during World War I, right? So the front line didn't push into Germany. The Germans asked for a ceasefire before the Allies actually make it into German territory. Hitler is going to monopolize that and use it to his advantage whenever they talk about causes of World War II. All right, so World War I ends, right? The Germans, they surrender. There's an armistice and stuff. And even before World War I was over, Wilson knew that this was coming. So Woodrow Wilson, our president, came up with this document called the 14 Points. So he gives the speech, the 14 points, and where he lines out the 14 things that the Allies need to do in order to make sure that this is the war to end all wars, right? He wants to guarantee world peace. So his first proposal calls for self-determination. He says that all different ethnicities, right, especially in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, remember, that's part of the reason why this whole world war breaks out in the first place, because all these people, they believe that their ethnic group should have their own nation. So self-determination is going to be one of the key cornerstones of Wilson's 14 points. Each cultural group gets its own country. Another one of the 14 points is leniency. They want leniency towards the German Empire. So if you remember that Germany wasn't the one that started World War I, right? Technically, Austria-Hungary is the one that starts World War I. Problem is that by the end of World War I, Austria-Hungary won't exist anymore, right? So it's just Germany is the last one to blame. So Wilson's saying don't blame Germany, right? And then another one of the major points out of Wilson's 14 points is the creation of the League of Nations. That instead of just countries declaring war at each other, on each other and stuff, instead maybe they should talk about their differences, right? They should form a league where they can negotiate instead of resorting to war. All right. So Wilson is going to also promote free trade, so lower tariffs. He said that if we start tariffing other countries and stuff, that will increase tensions, which will result in war. So if we have free trade, we don't have to worry about getting declared war on, right? Also, remember, one of the main causes of the U.S. joining World War I is because of unrestricted submarine warfare. So Wilson wants to prevent this happening again. Also, he's calling for a reduction of arms supplies. Remember, militarism being one of the main causes of World War I. He wants to limit that by reducing militarism. And then self-determination, right? And then also the League of Nations. So even though Wilson proposes the League of Nations, and eventually England and France are like, you know what, that's a good idea. So England and France, they really buy in on this League of Nations thing. They create it. But America does not join the League of Nations. Eventually the League of Nations will be known as like the United Nations, which the institution still exists today. But this is one of the causes of World War II to happen, right? So the end of World War I, eventually it builds up to the cause of World War II. So America doesn't join this League of Nations. And America is relatively unscathed at the end of World War I. They have a booming economy. They, respectively lost very little troops and stuff. But they decide not to join. They said that they have had enough of war in Europe and stuff, and now America needs to go back to being isolationist and mind their own business. So Wilson came up with the 14 points, right? And the Allies, they gave and took some of these 14 points. They didn't accept all of them. So World War I technically officially ends with the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so the Treaty of Versailles, they took Wilson's 14 points and they agreed to self-determination. So they broke up the Austro-Hungarian Empire and they allowed all these new states to form. However, they are going to blame Germany wholeheartedly. They're going to say that Germany is the reason why World War I happened. They're the reason for all this death and destruction, and they need to pay back, right? So Britain and France demanded war reparations be placed on Germany. So they're going to say that Germany owes England and France about $33 billion, which in today's money is about $269 billion. And it's going to take until like the early 2000s for Germany to actually pay back this war debt. Also, Germany has to sign something called the War Guilt Clause, saying that they are the ones who instigated and started World War I, and it's all their fault, even though it wasn't, right? Austria-Hungary was the one that technically began World War I. And really everyone, when we talked about that acronym MAIN, right? All these European countries were participating in militarism and the alliance system and imperialism. But they needed a scapegoat, and Germany was the scapegoat because they lost the war. So also Germany is going to lose its empire, its overseas territories like East Africa and Tanzania and stuff. That's going to go to the Allies. But also Germany is going to lose territory, this border along France and Germany called Alsace-Lorraine, and also the Ruhr Valley, which is really the heartland of Germany's industrial output. So Germany is going to end up losing these two very important pieces of land that has a lot of important natural resources. So Germany is already like cut off, right? They lost a large part of their industrial output and stuff, and then they're straddled with this $33 billion bill. Also, they require that Germany limits its size of its standing army, so they want to reduce militarism. They're going to ban Germany from having, submarines and stuff. And then in the bottom right-hand picture, you could see that the German diplomats weren't even allowed to attend these negotiations. So you could see that the Allied powers, they're behind closed doors. They're calling all the shots in this Treaty of Versailles. And Germany has really no say in how this peace treaty is going to be dealt with. All right, so the last thing that we'll talk about is America's home front during World War I. Okay, so we're sort of rewinding the clock a little bit, right? We'll get back to Germany and the Great Depression and stuff in a future video. But for the moment, we got to talk about what is America doing at home, right? So World War I breaks out, right? The Zimmerman telegram happens. America needs to raise money for the war effort. So what they encourage Americans to do is to invest in Liberty bonds. Liberty bonds are like a certificate sold to citizens that could be redeemed for money later, sort of like a government savings account, right? So you could give the government like $100 or whatever, and then like after 5 years you could get like $150 back. So the sale of these war bonds are going to raise to more than $20 billion, and all that money is going towards the war effort. So it's a huge fundraiser in order to pay for this world war. Also, we start seeing food rationing appear during World War I. So people couldn't just like go to the store and buy whatever they want like normal, because now it's wartime. All this extra food and supplies and stuff needed to go to the front lines, go to these troops that are starving. So Americans were encouraged to conserve food. They were encouraged to do something called like victory gardens, right? So while the men are off fighting and stuff, women were encouraged to create gardens, right? And grow as much of their own food as they can, so all that extra food could go to the troops. So over here you can see a picture of what one of these Liberty bonds look like. Yeah. So during World War I, we also start seeing this movement called the Great Migration. And we sort of mentioned Great Migration a little bit before, but during World War I, a lot of African Americans are going to flee the South and go up north in order to look for better opportunities and jobs. We talked about a lot of black people and stuff out the South. They're moving out west, becoming cowboys and moving to California and all that stuff. So between 1910 and 1920, so right there in the middle of World War One, about 1.2 million African Americans are going to move up north, and a lot of them are going to go to places like Detroit and be a large part of like the auto industry and stuff, and places like New York when we talk about the Harlem Hellfighters. So we have the Great Migration happening. All these African Americans are moving up north. But also, we have this, the U.S. government, they want to keep the war effort going strong. They want people to support the war. So we start seeing propaganda posters appearing everywhere. We saw it before, all those like anti-German propaganda posters. What the last thing that the American government wanted when World War One breaks out is for people to criticize the government, like, oh, why are we even in this war? Maybe we shouldn't be fighting this war. They don't want any of this. So as the war goes on, a lot of people are going to start speaking out against World War One. Some Americans argued that this was a European conflict and America should have stayed out of it in the first place. Others said that they opposed this unprecedented violence, right? And many opposed the draft, saying that the draft was unconstitutional and illegal. And labor unions and industrial workers feared that if American men were sent overseas and die, that their jobs would be replaced by immigrants and women. So there was a lot of pushback against World War One. Even though a lot of Americans did support the war, also a lot of Americans did not support it, right? America was still very polarized as it is today, right? So what the American government comes up with is this thing called the Espionage and Sedition Act. So espionage the Espionage Act that was made in 1917 made it illegal to spy on, sabotage, or obstruct the U.S.'s war effort. And this includes criticizing it, right? So it made it illegal for you to use the U.S. mail in order to send anti-war messages. So if you write your uncle saying like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be in World War One and stuff, that could be intercepted and you could be thrown in jail for speaking out against the war. Now, this goes against our, a constitutional right to, freedom of speech. But we're in wartime, so during that time, right, those constitutional rights sort of got bent. The other thing is the Sedition Act, right? And it made it illegal to speak publicly against the war. So an example of this would be with Eugene Debs. We mentioned Eugene Debs earlier on. He is a member of the American Socialist Party. And he is going to run for, and he's advocating for workers' rights. So he's going to run for president for 5 times, right, between 1904 and 1920. And he's going to get around 1 million votes, 900,000 votes. So a lot of people supported him. He was a very well-known public figure at this time. So in 1918, Eugene Debs is going to give a speech that supports anti-war protest. And specifically, he is saying that industrial workers shouldn't have to go to the draft. So in response, Wilson calls him a traitor to the country and throws him in jail. He is arrested and tried for 10 accounts of sedition under the Espionage and Sedition Acts. And he was sentenced to prison for 10 years, and his right to vote was revoked. So he can't run for president anymore, right? He is thrown in jail because he's criticizing the U.S. government during wartime. So up top, you can see a picture of Eugene Debs before he gets arrested and then the day he left prison, right? So prison did a number on him. He did not age well there. So Debs' prison sentence is an example of how the U.S. violated the First Amendment right to freedom of speech successfully for the first time. All right, so that is all I have for World War I. I know it was a lot and stuff, but thank you for your attention, right? World War I and the U.S. involvement in it is definitely important to our story. You need to know it. Will show up on your midterms, so make sure you took good notes and you study it, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you.